Hello, my name is Ayman Rajih and you are watching the Arabic Hour.
They are forcing people, both businesses and household sector, to withdraw the money that they have in US dollar at an exchange rate of 1500 and 1500 or 1515. So that way they will be losing like 30 to 40% of the actual amount of the money they have in their banks.
On today's program, we'll be discussing Lebanon, specifically the economic crisis and its ramifications. As you know, Lebanese people have taken to the streets since October 17 to protest against the political elite seen as corrupt and unable to manage the country's worsening economic crisis. With us today, via Skype from Lebanon, is Dr. Walid Akar, an economist and lecturer at the American University of Science and Technology. Dr. Akar, welcome to the Arabic Hour. If we can,
Hi.
How are you?
Yep.
If we can get started, and if you can give us a summary economically, what is going on and what has led to people's frustrations and anger with the financial system and institutions in Lebanon?
I will try to be precise and brief. The fact is that the banks are unable to meet people's demands simply because the banks have made enormous amounts of loans to the Lebanese government over the past 30 years. Both the private commercial banks and the central bank have been using people's money to give loans to the public sector. Eventually, such loans were misused by the government, and we came to the point where the banks are unable now to meet, as I said, the demands of the depositors. The total amount of deposits in Lebanon is around $180 billion, which is considered to be a large amount relative to the GDP of $52 to $53 billion. This fact is due to the high interest rates that are offered by commercial banks in Lebanon. At the same time, the Lebanese central bank and the Lebanese government have been issuing government securities and government bonds for extremely high interest rates that averaged up to 40% for a 2-year bond, which is $100,000. This has been the case for so long now, and the fact is that maybe less than $10 billion is available now in commercial banks to meet people's and depositors' demands. This is why the crisis is taking place now. All the money has gone, spent by the public sector against people's interests, and to make things worse, this money did not help in building any of the infrastructure. We have one of the worst power electricity in Lebanon. We have been unable to deal with the garbage problem, which is a big problem now, environmental problem. We do not have water supply enough in our cities and hometowns, and roads, highways, not to mention public education and public hospitalization, which is really in very bad condition.
Now, let me understand this correctly. So you're saying there's a total or there was a total of $180 billion, and these are US dollars deposited in Lebanese banks.
Yes.
So what is left of this 180 billion? Does anybody know?
We cannot really tell, because the people and in the government are not always honest about this. But let me tell you something. In Lebanon, we use the US dollar much more for daily transactions. As a household sector, as a business sector, we use the dollar instead of the Lebanese pound. Also, this has been the case since the end of Civil War in 1992 or 1990. What we call the dollarization is approximately 72% of total deposits. So people's deposits is in US dollars, and now you go to your bank, you ask some of your money, and it's not available. And the funny part is that the government and the governor of the central bank, Mr. Salami, has created two different exchange rates for the US dollar and the Lebanese market. You have the official one, which is predetermined by the government at 15, which is 1,515, and you have the market, which is subject to free demand and supply, free market, which is fluctuating between 2,000, 2,100, 2,200. It depends. It's different it differs on daily basis. And this has created lots of instability, insecurity to the Lebanese public.
Okay, so
yes,
going back to those deposits. Today, if I'm a Lebanese depositor in a Lebanese institution, and I wanted to go in a bank and conduct business and withdraw money for my daily use or for my business, how is that working today as things stand?
It's not working. I'm sorry to say that. The limit is $200 a week, and a maximum of $400 a month, which is practically $200 every 2 weeks. But the bank would say that there's not enough dollars. You might wait for an hour or so, and still you won't get any of that. But the worst part is that businesses with accounts that are used for import of raw material and that do business with the outside are unable to use this money. Businesses that pay the wages and salaries of their employees are unable to use that. So the central bank has, determined a very low amount, which is $400 a month, that you can withdraw. That way they are forcing people, both businesses and household sector, to withdraw the money that they have in US dollar at an exchange rate of 1,500 and 1,500 or 1,515. So that way they will be losing like 30 to 40% of the actual amount of the money they have in their banks. And the difference is made by the commercial banks as pure profits on daily basis. So practically people's money is paper and ink now. There's no money. And you cannot use it for daily transactions. You cannot pay your rent. You cannot, import goods and products from the outside. You cannot wire money. If you want to send money to your relatives outside Lebanon, you cannot do that anymore. Even private companies like Western Union stopped doing that in US dollar. So in brief, the government, in cooperation with the banks, have been imposing and forcing people to sell their dollar at 1,500 Lebanese pounds, and lose the difference, which is eventually gained by the banks.
And this is because obviously the two exchange rates. The government wants to set the exchange rate at 1,500, 1,550, and the exchange rate out on the street is totally different.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Is it because there's no dollars, or is it because this is another a way of the banking sector and the government making more profit and taking away from the people of Lebanon?
Since the uprisings have taken place in October 17 last year, things have been worse. Instead of having people in the government trying to fix things, trying to lessen corruption, trying to lessen monopolies, trying to create some stability and meet the demands of people. Instead of doing that, they have been abusing this case of instability in what is helping them to make more profits and leading to more corruption day after day.
In your opinion, is there a dollar problem? Meaning, is there a supply of dollar problem in Lebanon?
No. It's very well known now that the people, the people with the depositors with large amounts of deposits have already wired the money outside Lebanon. This is something that is well known. Just to give you a quick idea, we have 0.8% of depositors in Lebanese banks. They acquire 54% of deposits. And if we take the richest 7%, they have 86% of deposits. So actually the banking sector is abusing the very little depositors, who the remaining 14% or 13%, that all those people, like 2 million depositors, have less than $50,000 in their accounts. This is where the banks are making the money. But the people with tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or they already have wired their money abroad, or they are enjoying the extremely high interest rates taking place in Lebanon today, because the government has not approved, and the central bank has not put any effort to lower the interest rates recently, which are one of the highest interest rates worldwide. This is how the commercial banks were able to attract those relatively high deposits, as I said in the beginning, relative to our GDP. This money has not been used by banks to make loans, neither personal loans, nor loans to the industry, to the manufacturing sector, to agricultural sector, to the services sector, to any productive sector. This money, this is a situation where the banking sector has one client, which is the government. This is how the case has been since a long time. The Lebanese government tried hard to borrow only from Lebanese banks in the past 20 years. All the pledges made by the World Bank, the Lebanese government refused to take. Most of them were not really taken by the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government enjoys, because of corruption, to get loans only from Lebanese banks in an agreement made by offering those banks extremely high interest rates, and at the same time, we need to know that those banks are mostly owned by the people in power themselves.
Interesting. Let's shift bases a little bit. Today,
Yep.
what does the Lebanese economy, what's it based on? What sectors is it based on? What is it agriculture? Is it manufacturing? Is it tourism?
Lebanese economy is not considered to be a productive economy, meaning it is not an economy that is based on productive sectors. We have been claiming this for a long time, despite the fact that we lack any decent infrastructure, that we can depend on tourism and in general on the services sector, which is a myth, that has never been the case. This is why the unemployment rate is extremely high. I cannot give you any figures, because this is a country that has never made any attempt to measure its unemployment rate. I mean, as weird as it sounds, this has been the case since decades. There was not even one attempt by any official government to measure the official unemployment rate in Lebanon. People, if I need to tell you about the Lebanese economy, going back to your question, we have a huge deficit of trade, which is approximately 1 to 6 or 1 to 7. Every dollar we import $6 to $7 in return. In total, our exports are less than $3 billion, while our total imports are $20 to $22 billion. We're not doing, we have this huge deficit in balance of trade. We have a almost dying manufacturing sector. Of course, Lebanon does not have any heavy industry. It has small industries, and those industries are almost dying. There is an estimated 50,000 people losing their jobs next March if things remain what they are today. 50,000 people losing their jobs by March in the manufacturing sector. The agricultural sector, I give myself the right to say, I permit myself to say almost non-existing.
Interesting. So, how do you see this playing out? What is the salvation? How does a country like Lebanon come out of this crisis?
You see, it's not only financial crisis. The more important and more severe crisis is the economic crisis. Is a country that is that lacks any welfare system, a country that does not have any fiscal policy that I can talk about, and added to that is the financial sector, which is the accumulation of tens of years of corruption in the government by the same people, by the same religious parties, and by the same system that is at least 30 years old, came to existence after the end of the Civil War. The salvation, I would say, it's impossible to fix any of those problems without with the same people in power. It's like asking for something and its opposite at the same time. It's impossible.
I know you're not a political commentator, and I understand right now there's a caretaker government in Lebanon.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not sure if having a government or not having a government helps or hinders things. Where, if you can, where do you see that happen? Do you see any type of government formation soon, or is this going to drag on for months?
The issue of the government, if we are able to come up with any government now, with the current prime minister, it is definitely that is much better than not having a government. It will at least put, it will stop the deterioration and the complete collapse. We are already suffering from a very deep recession, as I have explained. Hopefully we will have a government. But the problem, I repeat, is that the people in power has not changed any of their, any of the different ways they use to stay in power. They are not convinced, I guess, that it is time to put a limit to the corruption taking place in the government. This is the problem. This is when they abuse their power in different ways, leading to what we are suffering from now.
As we all know, there's a lot more Lebanese outside of Lebanon than are in Lebanon. Is there anything that the Lebanese diaspora across the world can do in this time of crisis? Is there anything that Lebanese can do that are outside Lebanon to help Lebanon this time?
Through the years, it is estimated that the Lebanese who are residents of other countries have been supporting their relatives, with approximately $5 to $6 billion every year. I cannot see that such families in Lebanon could have survived without this support. This is one thing. But to say that it is time for investment, it is time to attract, trust and faith in the Lebanese economy, this is not the time for it. But if the Lebanese who are living outside can complete, can continue the support, of the relatives here, this is the maximum I can think of, honestly. I cannot encourage anyone now to do anything beyond that.
Well, I was going to follow up with a question that in times of crisis, usually there's some investment opportunities, but I think you answered that for me, as maybe this is not the time to be investing anything in Lebanon.
If you allow me, because the issue of money transactions is gone, is non-existent. You cannot do any transaction. If you send money now to Lebanon to buy some real estate or some land, let's say, the recipients in Lebanon are not going to be able to use it. This is why this has made things very, very limited,
And where do you think that Our bailout will come from countries outside, or maybe international financial institutions, be it the IMF or the World Bank. Is there a possibility that those can come in and bail Lebanon out of its crisis?
Yeah. You see, we had what is called Paris 4, or CEDR in French. This is a pledge that was made 2 years ago in 2017 by European countries, led by France, to give a loan to Lebanon of approximately $11 billion. This loan was supposed to be given 5 billion of it by the World Bank and 1 billion by the European Bank, and the remaining 5 billion by different countries, like for instance Qatar $500 million and Kuwait another half, and so on. But basically it's a World Bank loan. But you know, because of the bad economic conditions, the Europeans, they had several conditions, you know, that Lebanon has to meet in order to get a pledge of 11 billion. One of those is to diminish the deficit rate to GDP, which was at that time in 2017 7%. If we divide the deficit in the budget by the Lebanese GDP, it was 7% in 2017, which is considered to be very high. And the goal was to diminish that to 2%, 1% every year in a span of 5 years. Contrary to that, you know, what happened is that this deficit to GDP increased now to 11%. And despite all the efforts made by the previous government to diminish that, it increased. And, you know, the Lebanese government here is dealing with the Europeans, and you cannot, you know, give them false information. This is serious business. And now we are stuck. The sadder people are not willing to give Lebanon, you know, any of that money, which was supposed to be given during a period of 10 years on an average of 1 billion every year to rebuild the infrastructure, to finish up with the big problem of power electricity in the public sector, the EDL, Électricité de Liban, that is costing Lebanon $2 billion of deficit every year. Incredible amount considering the budget of Lebanon. So that was the hope. That was the only thing that the previous government of Saad Hariri claiming that this will come to the rescue, and you know, we are waiting for Sadr and so on. But you know, finally, after decades, the only achievement that the government could claim through the years was to fix the exchange rate at of the US dollar at 1,500 Lebanese pounds. This only achievement is not the case anymore, because as everyone knows, this has been an artificial fixation of the Lebanese exchange rate to the dollar that cost Lebanon billions and billions of dollars of national debt that we are suffering from now. A national debt that has exceeded 85 million in the numbers and the figures of the government. I'm not giving any of the figures I'm giving you now during this interview is the official governmental figure. Understood. So no one is willing to help now, because we have been misusing this money through the years, you know.
The electricity issue in Lebanon has always interested me. And you just said that it's costing the government, or has been costing the government, $2 billion a year. Now, where is that coming from? How is that possible?
Because we borrow money from banks. This is what we have been doing. We issue government securities, we sell them to the banks at very high interest rates, and banks make supernormal profits on that, and that has been the case. As simple as that. As I told you, the banks of Lebanon have one customer, which is the Lebanese government. They don't, you go to get some loan if you have a small business in Lebanon. Let's say you want $50,000 for an existing business. You're not establishing a business. You want to renovate your business, or you want to expand it, do some investment. You won't get it. You should show a collateral probably of 500,000 to get 50,000. They're not interested in lending money to people. They're not interested in lending money to anyone. They have the government. They have the central bank, intermediary between the commercial banks and the government. And they have made, just to give you one figure, to make myself clear, in 2007, as a result of this lending by the commercial banks to the, through the central bank to the government, the commercial banks in Lebanon made total net profits of $7.4 billion. Please take into account at the same time that this is a country of a GDP of 52 billion. They made $7.4 billion net profits. The source of this figure is the Association of Banks of Lebanon, ABL. They have a monthly periodical. You can find them, you can look it up. And 400,000 people employed by the public sector in Lebanon. And part of that are retired people. They got that year $6 billion in total wages and salaries.
Incredible. That's an incredible amount of money, and that kind of explains why there's so many banks in Lebanon. It's always been a question of mine. Why is it in a country that's a small country, size-wise, economically wise, we have that has many banks? Do you have a figure on how many different banks there are in Lebanon?
Yes, of course. We used to have more than that, actually, in the early 1990s. There used to be like 100 banks. Like every company will have its own bank. But the central bank did something good by imposing on some of those banks to merge, to become in the range of 50 to 60 banks. But every bank has tens of branches, in Lebanon, as well as outside Lebanon. We have branches in Syria. Few of them, like Bank Audi, I guess, has branches in the US itself, and in Egypt and other countries. But what you mentioned, the remark you made, is very correct, is very true. It's inflated number of banks in Lebanon because of the reasons we have been mentioning. And the amount of profits they have made is concentrated, to make things worse, in the hands of three banks. There are three banks who have enjoyed 40 to 50% of profits through the years. Only three of them. And the remaining half goes to, the other 50 or so banks.
Interesting. Well, I guess banking, it's been a fantastic business in Lebanon.
Only for the few.
Only for the few, of course, and that unfortunately is how...
Only for the few, because this is concentration of money and wealth in the hands of the few. The figure I gave you earlier today, that 0.84%, this is what the central bank says, 0.84% of depositors have 54% of deposits. This is one of the highest inequalities in income distribution worldwide.
Now, how are people surviving today in Lebanon? Are salaries being paid in the public sector? Is the government paying
No.
salaries? No.
The government, yes.
Yes.
Till now, the government has been paying salaries steadily. But in the private sector, the majority of companies are paying half a salary, and all the salaries that used to be in the US dollar, remember that 70 to 74% of deposits and money transactions are dollarized in Lebanon. All those companies are paying in Lebanese pound now. None of them is using the dollar anymore.
So if you're getting paid in Lebanese pounds, so you're losing what percentage? Is it 20, 30%?
Yes, more than that, because if you take the exchange rate today, it's in the range of 2,200 Lebanese pounds for a dollar. So this is 700 Lebanese pound divided by 1,500. So you lose 40 to 50% of your income.
And so it's and obviously things are getting worse and worse by the day, and eventually people might not have anything left as far as.
Yeah, you know, some colleagues of mine calculated the situation for professors. You know, who, let's say you are earning, let's say, $10,000 a month. As your contract says, and suddenly you get half of that, 5,000, but in Lebanese pounds. So eventually you are getting 30% of what you used to get.
Interesting. Now, how are the banks? Now, as a depositor in a Lebanese bank, how am I going to ever get my money back? Is there any prospect of I don't know, becoming a shareholder in these banks and maybe get part of the profits, or what's the solution there?
They are speaking of a haircut, but the haircut has already been done on the small depositors by preventing them, by forcing them to withdraw their dollar in Lebanese pound. So this is the haircut. It has already been practiced, I guess. You know, many people, when they go and use their debit cards or credit cards, which is in dollar, they are using it in exchange to 1,500. And so they are losing the difference from the market exchange rate. So this is part of the haircut. But the haircut now is going to happen to take place with the government securities. Nothing official yet, because you need the approval of the parliament. You need the approval of the legislative power in order to do that. But you know, the banks and the central bank, they have their own way in practicing all kinds of limitations to get to reach the result that they wanted to reach in the first place.
We've heard some rumors, or maybe it is a fact, about what's being called fresh money, meaning that if the banks receive dollars from transfers into the banking system, for either if somebody's sending to family members or if a business generates, that they're calling this fresh money, and that you would be able to withdraw that money in dollars. Is there any truth to that?
The central bank issued some regulation at the beginning of the crisis, 3 or 4 months ago, imposing on banks this fresh money you are mentioning. Yes, if someone is sending money now, a transfer, a wire transfer, that the bank has to pay it in the currency, which is the US dollar or whatever. But the banks never practice that. And this is something maybe the American or people living in America, they won't understand. Because the banking sector does not really abide by the rules and the regulations that the central banks sometimes give to them. Anyway, this did not happen. Whether it's fresh money, whether it's old money, whether it is interest on your deposit, in your account, the banks do not understand that. But recently, something happened, which is actually yesterday. Western Union, known OMT in Lebanon, took the decision to accept all kinds of wires in foreign currency, what we call hard currency, basically the US dollar. So now if you wire money through Western Union is ready to give you the money in dollars, but they are charging approximately 20, they are $20 for $100. Can you imagine that?
So 20%.
20%. But if you send $2,000, they will charge you approximately $100. Okay? If you send $2,000, they will charge you $100, which is much more than the original rate they used to charge before the crisis took place.
And finally, how do you see Lebanon's future in the medium term, or I guess the short term, medium term, and the long term?
There is hope that the people in the streets can achieve some change, some drastic change. We need to change this system that is 100 years old, long before independence in 1943. We need to change the system. We need a drastic change. We cannot continue in the way things have been. We have reached a situation of complete collapse because of the corruption and because of the religious parties that we have, because of the misuse of power, the abuse of power by those politicians. I have a feeling that the people in the streets, the young kids, they would be able to achieve something in favor of Lebanon in the near future. I truly believe so. Because I'm always discussing those issues with the young generation in their early 20s, and I'm just telling you, what I hear from them.
Well, we hope that they can do that. We obviously wish the best for Lebanon, and we greatly appreciate you giving us your time today, Dr. Akar. All the best to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we hope to see you soon.
Give my best to the team of Arabic Hour.
Will do. Thank you very much.
I miss them all, and good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are watching the Arabic Hour, a program of news, views, culture, cuisine, and the Arab American experience. To view today's program or any previous programs, log on to our website at www.arabichour.org.
That's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of all the volunteers here at the Arabic Hour, this is Ayman Rajih, and I look forward to seeing you soon.